A moment of reckoning, words some have waited a lifetime to hear.
I am deeply sorry.
Pope Francis expressing sorrow on Indigenous land, asking for forgiveness, calling residential schools run by his church deplorable evil. Does addressing this nation's cruel past set it on a path towards reconciliation?
I wanted to hear, on behalf of the Catholic Church, I apologize. And I didn't hear that.
I'm Adrienne Arsenault in Edmonton tonight. Extensive coverage of a remarkable day in the history of this country. The apology, the response, and what happens now.
I'm Andrew Chang. Also tonight, a gunman in BC, a string of shootings, a community stunned.
Well, I don't know, I could be next.
And after that 15-hour Rogers outage, the company has some explaining to do.
You think Canadians have alternative and choice in this marketplace?
Very much so.
And you're saying that with a straight face?
The push to make sure it doesn't happen again. This is The National.
We are in Edmonton tonight, about an hour away from Masquachis, where Pope Francis delivered that apology to residential school survivors and their families right near the site of what was one of the largest residential schools in this country. Tomorrow, behind me, in Commonwealth Stadium, the Pope will lead a large-scale Holy Mass as Indigenous communities coast to coast to coast process all that was said and done right here today.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas.
The Pope expressed sorrow for the abuse carried out at residential schools run by the church, as he did in Rome this spring. But once again, he did not apologize on behalf of the church, only some of its members. The Holy Father spoke out against the cultural damage caused by colonization, but didn't mention the church's doctrine that validated conquest. Now, some accepted what they saw as sincerity and humility. Others felt that the Pope fell short of their expectations. Olivia Stefanovich was listening and watching and takes us through an extraordinary public ceremony.
An act of contrition. Pope Francis praying over the graves of generations. Lives cut short, say survivors, by the residential school the Roman Catholic Church ran at this site.
It is a blessing to receive and host you. You have traveled a long way to be with us on our land and to walk with us on the path of reconciliation.
That path leading the pontiff to a display of the culture the church tried to extinguish, along with the names of more than 4,000 children who either died or never returned.
I am deeply sorry.
Pope Francis built on his initial apology, saying the church cooperated with governments to carry out policies of forced assimilation.
Sorry for the ways in which, regrettably, many Christians supported the colonizing mentality of the powers that oppressed the Indigenous peoples.
After the apology, this moment of raw emotion, the Pope's mere presence reopened wounds.
I just feel really disappointed, really let down. But I wanted to hear, on behalf of the Catholic Church, I apologize for residential schools and for all of the atrocities that happened. And I didn't hear that.
But others found comfort in the Pope's words.
I think they were powerful. They were powerful. I think it came from the heart. So I'm happy with that.
A long time coming in their healing journey.
I'm blessed that I was able to go through what I went through and to be able to survive. And
the Pope returned 2 pairs of moccasins given to him in Rome, a pledge to keep walking toward reconciliation. Before he left, the crowd erupted as the Pope was given a traditional headdress to wear by the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner who invited him.
So, Olivia, we've really heard today an apology in two parts, the one this morning, but also the Pope went to Sacred Heart of the First Peoples, the Church of the First Peoples. That's where we were standing last night. That was later this afternoon. Walk us through what happened there.
Well, Pope Francis once again apologized. He said he's sorry for the fact that Catholics participated in policies of assimilation and enfranchisement, especially in the name of an education system, Adrienne, that's supposedly Christian. And he noted that this caused harm to Indigenous communities, that this took away their culture and spiritual identity. And although he did note harms of colonization, he did not go as far as to rescind the doctrine of discovery. And this has been long called for by Indigenous peoples. It's based on papal bulls that justified the seizure of Indigenous lands by colonial powers. So this is something that many survivors will be watching for closely over the next few days, hoping that Pope Francis will take this next step.
Because he is expected to continue speaking as he moves throughout this country.
Exactly.
All right, Olivia, thank you very much for all of your coverage. So a lot of this is really hard to hear and it's hard to confront. Lots of people today were taken aback by their emotions. So for anyone affected by residential schools and in need of some support, there is a 24-hour line you can call. So grab this number. It is 1-866-925-4419. Now, when the Pope spoke today, it was at length and in places very specific, referring back to stories he'd heard when residential school survivors and Indigenous delegates went to the Vatican in March. Here's more of exactly what he said.
Esperaba que llegara este momento para estar entre ustedes. Desde aquí, desde este lugar tristemente evocativo, quisiera comenzar lo que deseo en mi interior, una peregrinación penitencial. Pienso en el drama sufrido por tantos de ustedes, por sus familias, por sus comunidades, en lo que ustedes compartieron conmigo sobre los sufrimientos padecidos en las escuelas residenciales. Me encuentro entre ustedes porque el primer paso de esta peregrinación penitencial es el de renovar mi pedido de perdón y decirles de todo corazón que estoy profundamente dolido.
So the Pope came to Canada with really one focus, to make that apology to Indigenous people. But for many of the millions of Catholics in this country, his presence here alone is a profound event. Karen Paul's got some of their impressions of their church and its leader.
That I am deeply sorry.
Watching Pope Francis apologize, this priest was visibly moved.
I ask forgiveness.
One thing that's just struck to my heart, I think was struck to the heart of all the parishioners here, is how families were, taken apart.
He represents an established Ukrainian community in Winnipeg's North End. They're occupied with the war in Ukraine, but still want to be part of this journey to reconciliation.
Moving forward, how do we move forward?
These women went to Mass after watching the apology.
I felt for all the mothers and the fathers whose children were taken away from them.
My greatest hope is that with prayers and with understanding and with peace, our Indigenous brothers and sisters would be at peace.
But many Indigenous people say they wanted to hear the Pope apologize on behalf of the Catholic Church and not just individual members. But there may be a reason he didn't. Experts point to an important distinction in Catholic theology. While Christians are human and sinful, the Church represents God, who can do no wrong.
He acknowledged the complicity of individuals, I think including leaders, but individuals rather than the Church.
Because I'm on my healing journey already.
Back in Winnipeg, this mother of three spent much of her day off watching coverage of the Pope's visit.
He sent blankets, and my babies died.
Troubled by stories of elders neglected and abused as children.
The Catholic Church was a significant part of this experience and this trauma. We can't, as a church, as a community, dictate what they need. We need to ask them what they need from us.
A big task that has only just begun. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Just a little later in the show, we will get some perspective from former National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Phil Fontaine, who has worked for this day, for this moment, for decades, and was with the Pope today.
He's come here before us, a humble person, begging for forgiveness. And of course, you have to take that seriously.
He is a leader. He's a residential school survivor. What he heard in the Pope's words, that's coming up. And so first, though, this has been a really busy day of news. So let's head over to Andrew in Toronto. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Adrienne. Thanks very much for that. Now, according to police, for hours, a gunman stalked the streets of Langley, BC, shooting and killing. 3 people are now dead, including a suspect. And as Benit Breit shows us, the attacks have left a community on edge.
It all began in the early hours of the morning when a suspect moving through Langley streets shot 4 people, killing 2 before confronting police.
Police fired their weapons and fatally shot the male.
We have a lot of information to cover. We're interviewing the suspect's family and associates, and hopefully through that information we'll be able to piece together what happened.
Police believe the shootings lasted 5 hours, the gunmen striking at multiple locations, killing 1 man at the bus loop, another near a supporting housing project. He shot 1 woman who remains in critical condition. Another man has a gunshot wound to the leg. Police initially told CBC News the victims were all vulnerable people facing homelessness, but have since said that remains under investigation.
It is too early to say that right now, exactly who they are.
The mayor of Langley urged the community to pull together in the face of tragedy.
It's with a very heavy heart that I'm here, and our hearts, thoughts, and prayers go out to all those affected families and friends of those that were involved.
But the shooting has left many in the community on edge.
Were they innocent victims? That's the thing. I don't want to get shot at.
Well, I don't know. I could be next. Nobody knows.
It's not something that we want to continue around here. It's not a good feeling.
Police believe the shooting was targeted, and the investigation is now looking into whether the suspect acted alone. Benit Breit, CBC News, Langley, BC.
Well, 2 men have been charged with murder in British Columbia in connection with yesterday's deadly shooting in Whistler. That shooting happened in this busy area outside a hotel. 2 men were killed. Police believe the shooting was gang-related. 5 people have been arrested. Well, Canada's top Mountie says she did not cross the line. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki testified on Parliament Hill today, telling MPs that she did not pressure Nova Scotia mass shooting investigators as a way of helping advance Ottawa's gun control agenda. But as Catherine Tunney explains, other Mounties tell a different story.
RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki had one message repeated over and over.
Let me be clear. I did not interfere in the investigation around this tragedy, nor did I experience political interference.
Canada's top Mountie denied.
Asking questions is not interference.
And denied, again and again, that there was anything inappropriate about the conversation she had with the federal government, or that she jeopardized the investigation into the 2020 mass shooting. She's responding to claims from this man, Superintendent Darren Campbell. In these handwritten notes made public last month, Campbell alleges Lucki says she promised the government they'd reveal what weapons were used by the killer, ahead of the Liberals' plan to ban certain makes and models as part of new gun control legislation. A version backed up by another Mountie today.
Did the Commissioner Lucki directly tie that to the forthcoming firearm policy from the Liberal government?
Yes. Lucki says she was told by her comms team that details about the guns would be made public, and admitted today that led to frustrations when it didn't happen. An error, but not interference, she says.
Would it be fair to say, Commissioner, that it is your belief that this entire saga has been the result of a miscommunication, that you were mistakenly told that the information about the guns would be revealed, and that led to the meeting where you were unhappy about the information not being revealed? Would you say the miscommunication is the heart of the issue?
Yeah, I think miscommunication is the heart of many issues.
Superintendent Campbell has long argued that releasing the type of weapons could have jeopardized an investigation. He's expected to be asked more about his side of the story as part of the Mass Casualty Commission when he appears under oath tomorrow. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, we're expecting more high-profile testimony in Ottawa this week when Hockey Canada hearings resume tomorrow. Today, the organization released an action plan to address what it calls systemic issues in hockey. The plan includes a new system for tracking and reporting abuse complaints, enhanced screening measures for players, and a universal code of conduct. Hockey Canada is accused of mishandling an alleged gang sexual assault involving players in 2018. A second allegation involving the 2003 Canadian junior team surfaced last week. Well, the CEO of Rogers was also in the hot seat today, facing questions about the widespread network failure that knocked out service for millions of Canadians. The promise to Canadians that it will never happen again, but it might not be that simple. Marina von Stackelberg has that story.
Rogers CEO Tony Staffieri grilled for an hour over his company's failure.
We had procedures in place to ensure that 911 and emergency essential services would switch over to an alternate carrier's network. For very specific technical reasons, that automatic transfer did not happen.
The Rogers outage left 12 million customers without cell or internet service. The number could be even higher in the future. Rogers is trying to merge with its rival, Shaw.
They have alternative and they have choice.
Wait, you think Canadians have alternative and choice in this marketplace?
Very much so.
And you're saying that with a straight face?
Canada's telecommunications regulator says it's barely begun its investigation.
This was unprecedented, and we now need to focus on how do we assure in this type of situation emergency services are connected.
But those steps are unclear. Canada's industry minister was questioned about whether he can hold big telecoms accountable.
When the Minister of Industry speak to them, they do ask them to testify.
They didn't even call you.
Especially when Rogers didn't initially notify the Canadian government about the outage.
It should not be to the minister to chase the CEO of a major telco in Canada when something like that happens.
Customers like Andrew Cameron are expecting their Rogers refund. What he really wants are more options for cell providers and penalties.
Just the emotional toll that everybody's at wit's end, and then to not be able to run your business for a full day, and the compensation you get is a 15% discount on 1 month's service.
Some MPs would like to see a Bill of Rights for wireless customers, like there is for airline passengers. The government says these hearings are just the first step to ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, crews in Newfoundland continue to battle a pair of major wildfires. The flames have forced the closure of a busy highway for the second day, cutting off thousands of people from parts of the island. Much of the region had been under a heat warning. People in eastern Ontario are cleaning up after a storm and possible tornadoes ripped through the region over the weekend. Several properties severely damaged, trees and power lines knocked down. Luckily, there were no reported injuries or deaths. Well, recent remarks from the Minister of Environment and Climate Change have sparked concern among environmentalists. On CBC Radio's The House, Stephen Guilbeault said he might extend the deadline for the oil and gas industry to reduce carbon emissions. David Thurton takes a closer look.
Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault was here to talk about plastic pollution. Instead, he was met with questions about giving Canada's largest carbon polluters more time.
I think it's fair to give them some time to put in place the measures that are required.
An extra 2 years for Canada's oil and gas industry to meet federal 2030 climate targets.
They are allowing oil and gas companies to influence climate policy at a time where we can't afford any more delays.
For some in Alberta's oil patch, it's just being realistic.
You can't do what you can't do, so pushing it back is sensible.
The fact that the minister has now very clearly acknowledged that timing might be more flexible is incredibly welcome.
One of Canada's largest oil and gas companies, Suncor, says it needs more time to build massive carbon capture infrastructure like this. All of that, it says, cannot happen in 8 years.
We just don't think we can build it in time, partly because of what are actually very strong, although sometimes inefficient, regulatory system in this country.
But some experts say there are quicker and cheaper ways for oil and gas to meet climate targets, such as sealing methane leaks and other harmful greenhouse gas.
It's just a matter of sending people down the lines, checking for leaks, tightening everything up. Where there are big leaks, you put well hoods on and you put a pipe in to get the gas.
This climate advocate says the industry knew the government would be imposing an emissions cap, and it should have been ready.
There's no reason at this point that the government should be entertaining any kind of delay or weakening of this policy.
Input from the public will be accepted until the end of September, and from there, the Environment Minister will unveil his final plan early next year. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Myanmar tonight, a move likely aimed at inspiring fear has instead sparked outrage. What we know about the executions that have triggered international condemnation.
But first, we are back from Edmonton with reaction to a historic apology.
I am deeply sorry.
A conversation on the significance of the Pope's words with a man who has spent decades working towards precisely this moment.
It was an emotional moment. It was a momentous occasion. It was a special moment for us. It was our day.
And we'll hear from the next generation.
That, I think, would be a strong symbolic statement.
What younger Indigenous people hope for the future. The National is back in just 2 minutes. I'm sorry. Those are the words many were counting on, said in the place where it matters most, on this soil.
Estoy dolido.
I am sorry. I ask forgiveness.
What is less clear is how the Pope's words felt in the hearts of those who still live with the legacy of residential schools. After all, the value of an apology can only really be measured by those for whom it is intended. Now, earlier I spoke with Phil Fontaine, a former national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, a residential school survivor, and someone who has traveled to Rome repeatedly, has met with more than one pope to advocate for an apology. He's heard versions of them, but an apology here is exactly what he fought so hard for. Thank you for spending time. You and I had a conversation this morning before the apology, and you seemed to be very hopeful. You seem to be very optimistic. And I know that's partly your character as well, but I'm wondering now that this day is ending, how do you feel?
I feel pretty good. I'm as optimistic as I was earlier in the day. I believe that we have a path forward. The Pope expressed not just an apology. He didn't just say, I am sorry. I think he laid out the work ahead of us. And we're talking about a collaborative undertaking with the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. And for example, an investigation on the facts that resulted in the residential school experience, and if you dig deeper into that file, what will an investigation find, right? So that's a challenge for not just the Catholic Church entities in Canada, but it's also our challenge, because we've leveled certain allegations and whatnot, and we know that what we've talked about is true. So we have to confirm our findings with the Catholic Church entities in Canada.
You know, as we watch some of that happen, someone I was sitting with was saying, but that's what we have the TRC for. You know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She said, I'm holding the volume that says what happened. So what else do you see coming out of an investigation?
Well, what's important here is that you're absolutely right. TRC, 94 calls to action, very comprehensive undertaking that took some years to conclude its work. Well, there are some digging that still has to occur as a result of, for example, the TRC, 94 calls to action. I mean, we didn't anticipate, for example, that we would find 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, even though TRC indicated very clearly that there could be anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 children that were left in unmarked graves and were never brought home. And so that might be part of the investigation.
Heard a number of conversations today of people saying, interesting to hear the Pope apologize almost again for the actions of individuals as opposed to apologizing for the policies of the church. Did that surprise you? Were you expecting to hear an apology for the actions of the institution?
When I listen to the Pope, I'm listening to someone that represents the church worldwide. He's speaking for the church. He's speaking for the institution. And so that's the interpretation I give to the words that are been expressed by the Holy Father. And if we're true to our word in terms of healing and reconciliation, we're going to have to be able to forgive. He's come here before us, a humble person, begging for forgiveness. And of course, you have to take that seriously, because we also want to move on. We want to find peace and solace in our lives. And if we can't bring ourselves to forgive, then this matter, this burden that we've had to shoulder for years and years, that'll carry on endlessly. And that's not something that I wish upon anyone.
You know, as a Canadian watching you over the decades, you know, you were open in 1990 with your experiences. And so many people have told us that because you were open, it allowed them to feel comfortable being open too. Were you struck by some faces today?
I was struck by the emotion that I saw in the faces of many. I saw people with tears. It was an emotional moment. It was a momentous occasion. It was a special moment for us. It was our day.
And tomorrow, in a way, is another day for you. 65,000 people, Commonwealth Stadium. You're going to be standing there before the Pope speaks. Do you have a sense of what you need people to hear from you tomorrow?
I might want to spend a bit of time speaking about forgiveness in the context of healing and reconciliation. I think that's so very important for survivors in our communities. And most importantly, it's important for Canada, right? Because Canada has certain responsibilities, right? Because so many of the residential schools were situated on our lands. And so it's both the church's responsibility and Canada's responsibility to give us our land back.
The work goes on.
It does, indeed.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The talk today, of course, all about what happened long ago, that which happened, which still inflicts damage now, and how to atone for it. But also critically, there were conversations about what a future could look like, has to look like.
The church may never be forgiven, but I believe the church can redeem itself.
When we come back, we will hear from young Indigenous people about why words alone cannot be enough. In Thunder Bay, Ontario, young Indigenous people are still facing the effects of colonialism every single day in the form of racism, discrimination, intergenerational trauma. As Jasmine Cabate shows us, for some of them, the Pope's words alone just aren't enough.
This, and this are all milkweed, good for butterflies. This is a lily.
For Mila Jacob, an Anishinaabe teen in Thunder Bay, these flowers are a way to honor those lost to residential schools.
Like, it looks very natural, like you would see this, in the bush.
The idea for planting this garden came after the discovery of graves in Kamloops.
But then I realized that it was something that you can't ignore, because it's like it just happened, and like to real people.
Yeah, as long as you don't break the roots.
Mila first learned about residential schools through her grandmother Laura, a survivor, and found strength in her convictions.
Something that really helped me and helped me speak up is just the phrase, speak your truth even if your voice shakes. And I think that's something that's, can help other people.
What about milkweed? Mila found her voice with this project, but she sees the legacy of residential schools on youth. So an apology from the Pope brings hesitancy. Do you think that his visit will help?
No, I don't.
How come?
An apology won't fix anything now. it won't bring back our culture or our language. Like, it's just words to me.
Instead, Mila finds resilience in family.
Now it's my job to educate using my language, to hear their own history, including what happened here on these grounds.
Mila's gardens show the strength youth in Thunder Bay have and need to have.
Like putting these orange flower memorial projects all around the city. Like, I want it to be all around Thunder Bay.
This is where Thunder Bay's residential school used to be, and now it's a memorial. The tragedy of displacement still continues here though. With addiction, no trust in police, these still remain problems for Indigenous youth.
Running through Thunder Bay is the McIntyre River. Just one of the rivers Indigenous youth have been pulled from. Some ruled accidents, many suspected of worse.
I can't go by the mall without thinking of that boy who was found in the river.
Bethany Kustachin works with youth in Thunder Bay. She was also in foster care for a decade.
There's so many factors that come into play for the youth crisis in Thunder Bay, and residential schools is definitely like a huge one of them.
Some Thunder Bay youth still face the isolation and pain that comes from being separated from family and community, a system some youth feel is designed to keep them down.
I think of the students who have to fly in from their communities to further their education.
Exactly. It's kind of the same because these Indigenous youth still have to leave their home communities and their families just to come to a racist city where they are placed under like white boarding homes. There's this great disconnection between them, their culture, their identity, and their ancestors.
With such pain and intergenerational trauma, Bethany wanted a more specific apology.
For the Pope to not acknowledge that this is genocide, like at least be more specific about what you put us through, or what the church put us through.
Do you think that this visit and this apology can help the youth move things forward?
I hope it can. I don't know what an apology is supposed to do for our youth up in their communities, because realistically, this isn't gonna get them out of whatever rut they're in. I don't know, it might just like give them some answers as to what happened. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I just find myself at somewhat of a loss for words.
In the Ojibwe language, it's called Inini Buju, which was changed from the English translation, Nana Buju, who is the Ojibwe trickster.
Esther Daibo and her son Dawa say healing starts with acknowledging the pain the schools have caused.
Well, when I ask students, what do you know about residential schools? And right away they pipe in, oh, it pays you money. It's all about money for them because that's what they learn.
We have to keep moving. I think if we're hinging on him and his words, we're stuck in that past mentality where it's about what they did to us.
Esther is a Catholic, but practices many of her Anishinaabe beliefs, teaching youth to be proud of who they are.
We used to use roots, right?
Today, she is teaching Dawa how to make a traditional swing. It needs to be sturdy, needs to cradle, support, and be balanced, much like both beliefs that Esther practices.
Up there, you see that one that's knotted? And for me, to be a Catholic person and to blend the traditional way of life, our sweat lodges, our ceremonies, it works for me. It works for me both ways. I don't weigh the other one less than the other. I take both of them and I work in that healing. And then the baby would swing like this.
So you use the Catholic faith and you use traditional Anishinaabe ways to heal?
Yes, yes, very much so.
And then the big fish are eaten by bigger fish. It goes around like that.
While the Pope's apology may be symbolic, Dawa has hope for what the future could hold.
The church may never be forgiven, but I believe the church can redeem itself. If he's going to call upon the Catholic Church of Canada, there could be like a powwow in each region hosted by the church as like a gesture that now we're not destroying your culture, we're willing to host your culture and give you a venue. That, I think, would be a strong symbolic statement.
A visit won't change what residential schools have done, but help for the future of these youth can make a difference. It's something they will be looking for. Jasmine Cabate, CBC News, Thunder Bay.
And today's apology is just the beginning of the Pope's tour. Tomorrow, he'll be giving Mass at the Commonwealth Stadium right behind us. We can sort of hear the choir practicing. There is room for 65,000 people. There's overflow room nearby, and CBC will have full live coverage. I'll be back here hosting our special coverage starting at 11 a.m. Eastern on CBC Television and CBC News Network. We'll also be back with extensive coverage tomorrow night on The National. We will also be back in just a few minutes with more special coverage from Edmonton. First, though, we return to you, Andrew, in Toronto.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Adrienne. After the break, the executions that have triggered a global outcry. What we know about the deaths of 4 pro-democracy activists in Myanmar, the condemnation, and the calls for action. Next. There is a renewed call for democratic governance in Myanmar after the country's military government executed 4 pro-democracy advocates. As Katie Nicholson reports, their deaths have prompted outcries from within the country and well beyond its borders.
A move perhaps to invoke fear, instead sparking rage. Months after sentencing political prisoners to death in secretive trials, Myanmar's military junta followed through, executing 4 democracy activists, among them one of the most well-known voices for the people, Ko Jimmy.
I'm really heartbroken and devastated because
we lost a really valuable and courageous democracy activist.
Not just an icon to Huai Nin, the daughter of another prominent activist, Ko Jimmy was a close family friend.
My dad is currently in prison at the moment. I can't imagine how he must be feeling. You know, this is his very close friend. It's like a brother to him.
It's not known exactly when the men were put to death or how, but among pro-democracy supporters, the impact is undeniable.
Our bloods are boiling today.
Anger at the military, which seized power more than a year ago, and at the wider international community for its perceived inaction.
It's just words, you know. It's like, oh, we will do this, we worry, we did that, blah, 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 you know. It's nothing in action.
Today, there were more words, including from Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who tweeted, "Canada condemns the Myanmar military regime's reprehensible acts of violence, including executions." Whether or not they do more than release statements, inside Myanmar, the executions have fired people up.
The military calculated that it will create fear in people and it will stop uprising and it will stop the revolution, but in reality, it has an opposite effect.
And perhaps 4 deaths will give those fighting for democracy new life. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, London.
When we come back, a plan to bring greener energy to downtown Vancouver.
This is right out of a 1960s power plant.
We'll tell you how that could soon change and why other cities may not be far behind.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's Daily News podcast, Front Burner, an update on the state of the war in Ukraine. What's driving Russia's concessions in grain and energy, and will Ukraine be able to take back territory lost? Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Plans are in the works to give a Vancouver steam plant a major overhaul to cut down on its massive carbon footprint. CBC senior meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff shows us the old technology currently helping to heat the city and the plans to transform it.
The Creative Energy Steam Plant is one of North America's largest district energy systems. The idea is that cities have one big centralized boiler that then carries that heat through a network of pipes, efficiently heating buildings using less energy than if each building had their own boiler. The concept has been around for centuries, dating back to the Romans, and 15 kilometers of pipeline has been heating downtown Vancouver customers since the 60s.
This is like right out of, like a 1960s power plant.
These are old pneumatic controls. Basically, they've been abandoned, and we've now obviously upgraded to computer-based. This was state-of-the-art back then.
So this is Command Central, basically.
Exactly, yes. So the old pneumatic controls, that's only for one or two boilers. The other 5 boilers are basically controlled from, it's called our Delta V system.
The 6 boilers in Vancouver generate steam at high pressure and high temperature. Pipes then carry that to heat radiators, underfloor heating, and domestic hot water, your hot shower in the morning. This has been incredibly efficient for high-density regions like Vancouver for years. Efficient, but not necessarily green.
That's the main fuel that comes into the plant.
This yellow pipe?
Yes, that's all natural gas. That's our main source of fuel.
Creative Energy's natural gas-powered boilers are the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Vancouver. That's why there are major plans to convert to a lower carbon fuel and, most importantly, have electric boilers do most of the work.
Completely renovating this plant, basically building a brand new plant. We are adding phased manner electric boilers and drawing power from BC Hydro's substation here in Murin substation.
First, the old boilers will be replaced with high-efficient boilers. This means no heat escapes and is wasted, but it's still a process that relies on fossil fuel. The ultimate goal is to go electric, with only the natural gas boilers as backup.
And the full rollout will be by 2028, 2029. So when we complete the whole thing, roughly 60 to 70% of the operations will be completely decarbonized, which kind of eliminates about 60 to 70,000 tons of carbon from downtown Vancouver.
That would be a massive reduction to the current carbon footprint of the downtown core.
Creative Energy currently has this proposal before the BC Utilities Commission and has similar plans for Horseshoe Bay, Toronto, and Seattle. Johanna Wagstaff, CBC News, Vancouver.
Interesting. When we come back, a look at the moments today that many won't soon forget. The National is back from Edmonton right after this. The Pope's apology on Indigenous land delivered directly to residential school survivors. There were thousands of people, and yet sometimes not a sound could be heard. And as soon as he said sorry, some faces changed, some tears flowed. It was extraordinary to witness. And so tonight, for a moment, take a moment to feel it.
It is a blessing to receive and host you among us.
I humbly beg forgiveness for the evil committed by so many Christians against the Indigenous peoples. I was given 2 pairs of moccasins as a sign of the suffering endured by Indigenous children.
That woman's face, the sound of her singing, Andrew, those are images that are staying with so many people today, as well as the silences. You know, a lot gets said in the spaces between the words, and there were a lot of messages delivered in those silences today.
Well, and thinking about what it must have been like to sit in silence like that, you know, no 2 people are exactly alike. No 2 people will have experienced today in quite the same way, and I suspect that'll continue to be true in the days to come. That's The National for this July 25th. Have a great night.